Ooh, it looks very different when you're sitting up here. This, for me, you have to know this is going to be a bit of a juggling act because I don't grip things very well, so I'm quite likely to drop my notes, the speaker, microphone, anything on the floor. It kind of might get messy. The other thing you need to be, you've got to be my guardian angels, because when I normally present, I like to move around. Get the drift? So shout if I start moving around and get too near to something dodgy. As I've been introduced, my name is Paul. The abridged version of my introduction and bio is simply, I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories, so we'll have a crack at doing some of that. I have a confession. I know what a Pentium is, so I have a bit of a vintage with me. Like most of you, I have a passion for technology and pushing boundaries. I love messing around with computers and code and stuff like that. And probably that's driven simply because that technology, the things that you guys create, the amazing things that Mr. Gavin builds, they give me my independence. They help me move. They help me work. They help me to enjoy leisure and live what I would describe as a rich and fulfilling life. So what we're talking about tonight is incredibly important for so many people. I can recall when it wasn't quite like that. My thoughts are drawn to the early 1980s. And I can remember attending a conference in Birmingham on the theme of human interaction and technology. This accessibility stuff hadn't really been invented then. Do you know, it was so different. People were just getting into their very first Macs. That thing called the internet hadn't been born. Floppy disks were all the rage, and coloured screens were a dream possession. Oh, how we've moved on in less than a lifetime. Do you know what? My watch can show me who's at my front door. I can use my voice to turn my lights on. I can send an email or a text or surf the internet without touching a keyboard or a mouse. My home turns devices on or off. Not always when I want them to, mind. And you know, if this, then that is my favorite plaything. I think that's what they call tech for good. I have no idea whether the slides are changing in the right bits, but see what happens. Right, I'm just going to rattle on and hope that the things behind me happen in sync. If they don't, it gets a bit more exciting. I guess some of you will have heard of Euan's Guide, and I guess others may be in the Euan Who camp. I'm delighted to say that Euan himself is actually in the room. He's just crept in and is sitting at the back, so you can grab him later. The name of Euan's Guide comes from Euan MacDonald and his sister Kiki, who set up the website. Euan became a wheelchair user and later a power chair user after having been diagnosed with motor neuron disease. With this life-changing experience came challenges and issues that have driven enterprise and endeavour. I guess you could say that Euan's Guide is a product of being faced with a challenge or two. At this point, I want to offer you a flavour of what we do, but perhaps not the recipe. My elevator pitch, if asked, may be something along the lines of, we have often been described as a kind of trip advisor for disabled people, their friends and families. Seeing as we're talking about products, once in a while, you meet a product that's been grown and developed to directly create a solution to a problem that an audience has identified. It's one of those We can do that. We can change that type of experiences. So what's the problem I'm talking about? Well, sometimes people need some help in deciding whether or not they can do things. I want to go with a very simple idea. Euan's guide is much richer than what I'm going to be talking about, but to explain what the problem is, take this idea. After this event, some folk may be thinking about continuing their chat and going for a drink in one of the many bars around here. Cracking idea. However, if you happen to be a disabled person, there's another layer after considering the idea of going to the pub. And I'll give you my example, because I'd love to pop down the pub and have the chat. But before I do that, I have to start thinking about, is it going to be within wheeling distance? I wonder if there are drop curbs all the way. Is this going to be easy to get in the door? Can I even open the door? Is there going to be enough space for me to find a table? I like to rest my drinks on a table, you see. Is there going to be an accessible loo? And is it easy to get to without having to embark on some crowd management strategies? And I wonder, yes, I do wonder, what are the staff going to be like? Are they going to smile and offer a warm welcome? Or is this going to be one of these untrained, uninitiated, minus neat box experiences where the staff see me rock up and consider me to be a fire hazard? Yes, folks, this still happens to me in 2019. So you see, there lies the problem. How do disabled people, their friends and families, know how accessible places and spaces are going to be for them? Euan and Kiki had their collection of favourite places that worked. Other families had the same. So what if? What if there was a way of collating these collections, these stories, these experiences, so that disabled people had greater choice? It was from this seemingly simple idea that Euan's Guide was born. A website developed to collate the stories, reviews invited, and the magical journey begun. We had a product, Euan's Guide. We had an audience. We started getting reviews, and here we are some time later. Euan's Guide has grown to become the go-to place for disabled access information. Members of the public contribute reviews about all sorts of places, and they share what is important to them. They write about the fun stuff, and they write about the need-to-know places. It's important to know about it's as important to know about visiting Codebase as it is visiting Edinburgh Castle. Venues, places and spaces can list on Euan's Guide and tell folk about the facilities that they have. Simply knowing that a place or space has an accessible toilet is enough to help many people decide to visit. So we embarked on our magical mystery tour as the journey of Euan's Guide continued. And we set out to change the world one review at a time. And on that journey we learnt so much. Our first interesting encounter came with our use of Google Maps. Great idea. But what happens when your users use voice command and control to access the map, or use eye gaze technology? Suddenly, Mr. Google's native controls are not so easy to use. Too small, too difficult to select, too hard to see. The irony was not lost that something designed to show you the way was blocking the way. For us, it was a case of building some new controls. But the important point here is not about building something new, but the engagement with your audience. Lesson 1, building products with people is very different from building products for people. We soon found out that different people search in different ways on Euan's Guide. Learned behaviours influenced searching, expectations influenced searching. We learned that people strongly identify with other people with similar access requirements. One review from a PowerShare user would often be enough to persuade another PowerShare user to make a visit. We needed a way to develop a feeling of community, identity, empathy, and practical understanding. Out of this came the design of our search filters. If one PowerShare user would identify with another, then the filter should be a PowerShare. From there, we worked with our audience and developed the filters that we have today. All practical things that people understand and identify with. Lesson 2, be brave enough to break out of traditional boxes, models, and standards. How do people write reviews on Euan's Guide? I'm not really thinking about the bit where people tell us what the access was like, what the transport links were like, what the loos were like, or what the people were like. I'm thinking more of the actual mechanisms for conveying what you want to say. Very early on in our journey, we learnt that sometimes, just sometimes, people may not want to write. They may want to gather their thoughts as audio recordings, or they may want to produce their feedback for a place or space as a short video clip. And so for us, lesson 3 was simple. Just because you build your product that way doesn't mean your audience will use it that way. We have an enormous band of people who write reviews. I would be saying to you, don't underestimate the value of user engagement. We talk to all of our users, we answer every email, we strive to go the extra mile in our relationship with our stakeholders. We have a host of people who write reviews to share their experiences of disabled access. Interestingly, well over 70% of the reviews written are 4-star or above. That's 4 stars out of 5. And people frequently visit places based on the strength of one review. We have a network of 50 or so Euan's Guide ambassadors who champion what we do and lend a hand when they can. We're changing the world, one review at a time. And so, lesson 4, your audience, your customers, your followers are your greatest ambassadors. Let them be part of your journey, and your product will move from being great to being amazing. With that thought, and the idea that you build your product with your audience, I'm going to close. So thanks for listening to the Euan's Guide story.